Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we bring you the latest news, information and analysis on what's really going on in the world of the BRICS. And today I want to talk about Russophobia and how it's turned out to be rather painful and expensive for certain countries now. The countries of Eastern Europe and the Baltic states have actually discovered that Russophobia is painful and expensive. The abandonment of Russian energy and the calls for tougher sanctions have had serious unintended consequences, negatively impacting the economies of Eastern Europe and the Baltic states, which have been the most vociferous and vocal critics of Russia. Now, the region is now facing the triple whammy of accelerating inflation, higher energy prices, and widening budget deficits. Now, in 2023, they borrowed 3 times more than in 2022. Now, the servicing of their debts is becoming increasingly difficult, and the cost of new borrowing has gone up dramatically as interest rates have increased. Now, analysts in the European Union fear that these countries will unleash a new Europe-wide financial crisis. Yeah, another one. Now, the European Central Bank, the ECB, has warned that European countries are seriously vulnerable to adverse shocks caused by geopolitical tensions and high interest rates. Plus, they're unable to reduce their large public debt. Now, the debt burden of the East European countries is especially alarming, with their debts having increased with the pace of borrowing through government bonds gone up to an unprecedented level. Now, at the end of 2023, their debts approached a record amount of 32 billion. Now, the countries with the highest debt burdens are Poland, Romania and Hungary. Now, over the past 2 years, the budget deficit in Eastern Europe has grown by 4.3% of the region's total GDP, and that's compared with 1.3% in 2021. Now, this is a consequence of military spending on refugees from the Ukraine, and training of the Ukraine military personnel, as well as subsidies for the people because of the much higher energy costs. Now, the rejection of Russian gas in the first year of sanctions alone cost the European continent almost €1 trillion. Yeah, €1 trillion, over which the Ukraine, which is not even a EU member. Now, the rejection of fossil fuels from Russia was supposed to punish it, but all it did was force the EU countries to spend heavily on purchasing energy resources from alternative marketplaces at much higher prices. Now, this accelerated the inflation in the region, and by the end of 2023, Hungary, Romania and Poland had recorded inflation rates of 17%, 6.8% and 6.8% respectively. Now, against the backdrop of rising prices, state central banks are still increasing their key interest rates, and this will cause a contraction of their economies, making it less resistant to further external negative factors, according to The Economist. Now, Bloomberg has observed that Eastern Europe has now become overly reliant on borrowing. The region is also accumulating debts in foreign currencies, which is not a suitable strategy at this time, as the cost of borrowing on foreign markets has risen sharply. Now, there's also a new challenge to emerge. As budget deficits continue to grow, there's an increased relying on debt-financed spending. And this is causing problems in raising more debt funding as the interest rates rise. A May report from the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, revealed that sovereign borrowing costs for the 10 East European countries have increased by approximately 1.5 percentage points since February 2022. Mary Valashvili, who's an economist at the Russian Higher School of Economics, notes that these issues can negatively impact the credit rating of the sovereign borrowers, prompting less lenders to issue loans at much higher interest rates to mitigate their own perceived risk. Now, the situation for the East European countries and the Baltic states is further complicated by the fact that the EU is now on the verge of confiscating Russian sovereign assets. Investors are very nervous about these prospects. Now, the ECB has repeatedly warned that the seizure of even the profits from the frozen Russian assets will undermine confidence in euro as a global currency. Now, the same thing was said by the Belgian depository at Euroclear. I mean, as Liv Mostry, who's executive director of the Euroclear deposit, emphasised, the use of Russian assets is as collateral is about as close to indirect stealing and confiscation as you can get, and it carries serious risks for the European financial security. Furthermore, the investment attractiveness of East European countries has been significantly reduced by the severance of its economic ties with Russia and the lack of diversification into new markets. Now, these countries' incomes are falling while their deficits and debts are rising. Investors and lenders find it hard to believe that the situation is going to improve in the near future, which has led to a further increase in their borrowing. That's according to Lazar Badalov, who's Associate Professor of Economics at the RUDN University. Now, the financial markets are also mindful of the debt crisis that everybody remembers that broke out in the European Union 15 years ago. That was when the PIGS countries, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece and Spain, were subsequently bailed out by France and Germany. However, France and Germany have now experienced economic difficulties, and it's unlikely they'll be able to do anything. I mean, for example, Germany's annual interest payments in 2023 reached 40 billion euros, which is 10 times more than they were paying in 2021. And that's despite the fact that they've got declining tax revenues due to the recession. France, the government has announced that the country's public finances are in a catastrophic state. According to a member of the EU Parliament, Geoffroy Didier, the budget deficit has reached almost 4.9% of France's GDP, and the country's debt burden continues to grow to unsustainable levels. Now, in light of these figures, it's clear that there's no one to help those poor ones out of this threat. So it's possible at this time, the countries of the EU, PEL countries, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, may need to be saved from their serious financial situations, but nobody there to help them. I mean, all our problems are obvious to the financial world, which is, in such difficult times, prefers to keep it silent, but act by raising the stakes in the form of interest rates, according to Badalov. I mean, all of this will have negative consequences. In the short term, there's going to be an increase in the cost of debt servicing, that's interest that they have to pay. In the long term, it's a decrease in the ratings and a drop in investment attractiveness, which means a drop in revenues and tax revenues, investment, etc. Furthermore, the struggle for access to any resources, be it financial or energy, within the European Union will intensify in the near future. I mean, there's various internal contradictions going on between countries and blocs of the states within the EU, and they can only intensify. And that's predicted by Andrei Gusev, who's Associate Professor of Corporate Finance and Governance at the Russian Financial University. According to him, the centrifugal forces are increasing. For example, Hungary is already orientating its economy towards China, and it's not embarrassed by the consequences or doesn't fear the criticism of Brussels for doing that. He also highlights the growing necessity for the redistribution of funds, which is becoming a significant challenge for the European Union, particularly in light of its ongoing financial support for the Ukraine, which it really can't afford. I mean, the economies of Eastern Europe are going to require more and more cash injections, but on the other hand, the countries of Southern and even Western Europe are facing large budget deficits. They're all demanding that bailout money. So where is the money going to come from? I mean, it does appear that the sanctions have cost the EU more than it can afford to pay, find or even borrow, and it's causing severe problems across the region, causing inflation and poverty. Perhaps the EU should have remembered the old proverb, look before you leap, and if only had thought through the sanctions was imposing on Russia before they leapt feet first into the fire. Anyway, thank you for watching, and do like and subscribe. I hope that you will introduce me to some of your friends by recommending this video. Do visit the website, SCOBRICSinsight.com. Lots of great articles on there, a lot of them by myself, and I will see you all again soon. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to being with you again soon.